Hello and welcome back to Around the Cauldron. Today I'm going to be speaking about the spring equinox. I remember as a young girl, my mum would always say when she saw the crocuses she knew spring was coming. So what do we know about the spring equinox? Well, there are two equinoxes in a year, spring and autumn, one in March and one in September. Depending on whether you're in the North Hemisphere or South Hemisphere, depends on whether it's spring equinox or autumn equinox for you. I live in the Northern Hemisphere, so for me it is the spring equinox. If you lived in Australia, you would be celebrating the autumn equinox. So the equinox is when the sun moves from the Southern Hemisphere into the Northern Hemisphere and vice versa. For us, it's spring equinox. The sun is moving from the south, above the equator, into the northern hemisphere, bringing us spring and summer. The equinox will fall somewhere between the 19th and the 21st of March every year. For us in the UK, it is on the 20th of March this year. In some time zones, it may fall on the 19th. On the days of the equinoxes, the sun's axis is perpendicular to the sun's rays, meaning that in all regions on Earth receive about the same number of hours of sunlight. In other words, night and day are in principle the same length all over the world. This is the reason it's called equinox, derived from the Latin meaning equal night. However, this is a literal translation, not entirely true. In reality, equinox days don't have exactly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of dark. In modern paganism, we have 8 Sabbaths, or Sabbats. They are divided into what we call the Wheel of the Year. And on this Wheel of the Year, you will see that the spring equinox is the 4th one, and it's named Ostara, although it can sometimes be represented by different names. Here they are. I'm going to stick with Ostara because it's the one I know how to pronounce correctly. The origins of the word Ostara, Estera, Ostara, however you would like to pronounce it, is from the word east. But there is a story I'd like to tell you of a goddess named Ostara. Ostara is the goddess of spring. She is a divine maiden that brings forth the first light of day and springtime. She sleeps through winter and wakes on the first day of spring. She is responsible for resurrecting the world after the winter's frozen grip has been withdrawn. She blows the warm winds of springtime over the lands. Fields and trees become green again and flowers blossom. However, one year, Ostara woke up late. In a panic, she's rushing around trying to do her duties and bring spring forth, when she comes across a small bird who lays dying on the forest floor, his wings frozen by the snow. Saddened by this, Ostara takes hold of the bird and tries to revive him. She brings life back into the bird, but unfortunately the bird's wings are so damaged he is unable to fly. Filled with guilt, Ostara decides to turn the bird into a hare. A hare does not need wings to fly. She gives the hare the ability to run rapidly so he can evade hunters. Honouring his earlier life as a bird, she also gives him the ability to lay eggs in all the colours of the rainbow. Ostara loves her hare. He is a companion to her, but he's also her lover. But hares, being as hares are, Ostara's companion is not faithful. And this angers Ostara. He's having numerous affairs left, right and centre, and she's not happy with this. So in a fit of anger, she threw him into the sky, where he unfortunately landed under the feet of the constellation Orion, the Hunter. He remains there to this day and is known as the constellation Lepus, the Hare. Although Ostara's heart had been broken by the hare, she still loved him, and once a year she allows him to return to Earth and give away his coloured eggs to children attending the Ostara festivals that were held each spring. And this is where the tradition of the Easter Bunny thus began. Or was it? I'm going to apologise in advance for butchering any of the words coming up, because I do not speak Latin, I do not speak Anglo-Saxon, I do not speak German. So I apologise in advance. The first mention of any of the goddesses that I talked about earlier was by an English monk who wrote in medieval Latin in Northumbria called Bede in 725. In his book, The Reckoning of Time, De Temporium Ration, Bede talks about the months and their original names. And the name for the month April was Estoromonov. Again, I apologise for my mispronunciation if it is wrong, because, again, I do not speak Anglo-Saxon. Anyway, this is what Bede wrote about the month. He said, Estoromonov has a name which is now translated as Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs named Ostara, in whose honour feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honoured name of the old observance. So Easter month became Easter. The next mention of a goddess is through Jacob Grimm. Now, Jacob Grimm is famous for his folklores that he wrote with his brother Wilhelm, Grimm's fairy tales as we know them today. But in 1835, Jacob Grimm wrote a book, the Deutsche Mythology, German mythology, in which he talks about the goddess Ostara. He says, we Germans to this day call April Ostaramonov. Ostaramonov is found as early as Engerhardt, the great Christian festival which usually falls in April at the end of March, bears the oldest OHG remains of the name Ostara. It is mostly found in the plural because 2 days were kept at Easter. This Ostara, like the Anglo-Saxon Ostara, must in heathen religion have denoted a higher being whose worship was so firmly rooted that the Christian teachers tolerated the name and applied it to one of their own grandest anniversaries. What we have to remember, though, is that Jacob Grimm took most of his findings from reading Bede's work, although he did say he had oral proof that such goddess existed. Grimm details that the old High German adverb Oster expresses movement towards the rising sun, as did the Old Norse term Ostra, Austr, and potentially Anglo-Saxon Estor and Gothic Oster. Grimm compares these terms to the identical Latin term Esther and contends that the cult of the goddess may have been centered around the Old Norse form Oster, or that her cult may have already been extinct by the time of Christianization. Grimm notes that the Old Norse Prosa Edda book attests to a male being called Astri, whom he describes as a spirit of light. Grimm comments that the female version would have been called Astra, yet that the High German and Saxon people seem to have only formed Ostara and Estra feminine, and not Ostaro and Istra masculine. Grimm additionally speculates on the nature of the goddess and the surviving folk customs that may have been associated with her in Germany. He says, Ostara, Estra, seems therefore to have been the divinity of the radiant dawn, of unspringing light, a spectacle that brings joy and blessing, whose meaning could be easily adapted by the resurrection day of the Christian God. Bonfires were lighted at Easter, and according to popular belief of long standing, the moment the sun rises on Easter Sunday morning, he gives 3 joyful leaps. He dances for joy. Water drawn on Easter morning is like that at Christmas, holy and healing. Here also heathen notions seem to have grafted themselves onto great Christian festivals. Maidens clothed in white, who at Easter, at the season of returning spring, show themselves in clefts in the rock and on mountains, are suggestive of the ancient goddess. So where does the hair come into the story? Well, it came from another German who wrote another book called German Mythology, called Adolf Holtzmann. In his book, he wrote, "The Easter hare is inexplicable to me, but probably the hare was sacred to the animal of Ostara, just as there is a hare on the statue of Abnoba, citing folk Easter customs in Leicestershire, England." Adolf Holtzmann had also speculated that the hare must once have been a bird because it lays eggs. In modern German folklore, from this statement, numerous later sources built on the modern legend in which the goddess Ostara transformed a bird into egg-laying hare. So is it all just folk stories and fairy tales? Well, most of our knowledge on ancient gods and goddesses were clearly vocalized because people didn't write. So, was there a goddess Ostara or not? In 1958, over 150 inscriptions from the 2nd and 3rd century referring to the Matrion Ostrahani were discovered. The Romano-Germanic votive inscriptions to the goddess, a triad of goddesses, were discovered in Mockenharif, Germany. Again, I apologise for the butchering of this name. They are datable to around 150 to 250 CE. Most of these inscriptions are incomplete, yet many are at least reasonably legible. Some of these inscriptions refer to Ostriatus. The name of these goddesses certainly derived from the stem Ostri, which if Germanic would connect the Old English estuary, although the goddess might equally have developed entirely independently. So we still don't know whether there was actually a goddess, Ostara, Osteri, Esri, however you want to pronounce it. All that we know is what we can read, and really it dates back to Bede and Jacob Grimm. Whether you believe in the story of the goddess or not, whether you believe in Ostara or not, the spring equinox is an important time of year. It marks the end of winter and the beginning of spring, coming out of the darkness into the light. It marks rebirth. It marks the beginning of the new season. Plants coming up. Many of us would spend the time spring cleaning. But not only do you spring clean your house, And your garden, good time to tidy up the garden, but it's also a time to spring clean your mind and your soul. It's time to get rid of all that dark burden from the winter. It's time to get rid of all the dark energy that you've been holding on to. It's a good time for you to make promises to yourself, to set your intentions, to plant the seeds. Yes, it is a time to plant seeds in the garden, but it's also a time to plant seeds for what you want your future to bring. Set out your intentions and get them seeds growing. If you want to start something new, this is a time to put that in motion, plant them seeds and get it growing. So no matter how you celebrate the equinox, whether it's with chocolate eggs, with flowers that are freshly grown, with tidying your garden and planting new seeds, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful spring equinox. Blessed be.